7. Anatomy of a co-design drawing. The sequence of drawing. Each part of the co-design drawing has a specific function to fulfill. Using the following example from the Langevin Community School, Calgary, during a study for a projected rooftop greenhouse, an image is built up to tell a particular story. To continue with the linguistic analogy, while dialogue provides the background for the story, each part of the drawing is a chapter within the entire program. 1. Draw the human figure. There are several communication advantages in starting with a human figure. It places the viewers centrally in a scene, enabling them to visualize it as a real experience around them to enter into the scene. By establishing the figure as the measure of space, the image will possess greater human dimension. The scene is established at eye level, relating it to the true visual experience of both viewer and artist. For the artist, the figure establishes a scale to the scene, for a measure from the eye to the ground can be used to place all other objects accurately in space. 2. Discuss and draw the furniture and floor surface. Consider the first point of contact with the environment, the kind of chair you're sitting in, or the kind of floor you are standing on. The shapes, finishes, and material begin to establish the mood and qualities of the scene. 3. Draw the other people around the central figure. This provides a sense of social distance of other people around you in a scene and reinforces the idea of people first in a design process. The idea is to describe visually the whole human scene, the social activity, and further enable the viewers to imagine themselves in the scene and relate it to their own experience. The inclusion of other figures is translated as measures of the dimensions required for the whole activity, the requirements in square footage. 4. Continue to draw other people as the viewers direct. Draw the furniture that they are using, the floor surfaces that they walk on, and other points of contact with the surroundings. Base the discussion of the surroundings on the question of light and where it should fall on the face of people in a sunny sitting space on planting. This helps establish the quantity and placement of windows and skylights, as well as the solid spaces between. The sequence of a workshop drawing. A. Draw the figure, positioned as the group directs, then furniture. B. Draw the other people and furniture, placed as directed by the viewers. C. Continue to add people and begin to add surrounding detail as directed. Complete the scene, adding notes to explain features. 5. Complete the scene, then add the written notes. Annotations around the drawing assist in recording the non-visual elements. The drawing itself is unable to portray such elements as the sound of a waterfall, the smell of plants, details that provide a more complete picture of the desired experience to others. 6. Ask the viewers to sign the drawing. This simple act completes the viewer's experience of the authorship of the drawing and reinforces their sense of responsibility towards the contents of the drawing and the likelihood that they will assume enough of a proprietary interest in it to work toward it as a reality. Preparing materials for the workshop. Each artist is equipped with a small set of materials for the image workshop. To begin with, a 19 by 24-inch foam core board is used as a light, portable drawing board. This is propped up on the knees of the artist and adjusted to suit both the artist's drawing comfort and the need of the workshop participants to see the image as it progresses. Some artists prefer to work in a standing position, and in this instance, they may prefer to prop the foam core on an easel or tape the drawing paper to a wall. In any case, the priority is for all participants to see both the drawing of the eye and the eyes of the artist. For paper, felt pens produce a clear and lasting image on non-bleed vellum surfaces. Individual drawing sheets about 18 by 24 inches may be cut from a roll or torn from a block pad prior to the workshop and fixed to the foam core boards with drafting tape. Each new image prepared with the participants begins with a fresh sheet of paper. The size of the paper and the drawing medium have been chosen for their suitability for black and white reproduction using the PMT, photomechanical transfer process. Finally, the artist is supplied with a black bullet nib marker and a palette of 10 wedge nib colored markers. This selection is deliberately simple but with enough variation to allow the representation of often asked for materials. The chapter on the use of color in co-design images details the palette selection. Warm-up exercise. The 6 essentials of brushwork. The first is called spirit, the second rhythm, the third thought, the fourth scenery, the fifth the brush, and the last is the ink. Qing Hao, AD 925. Drawing with some confidence before others in a workshop setting is a skill that can be improved over time. Co-design artists practice certain drawing exercises to warm up before a session of workshop drawing. These simple and quick exercises improve hand-eye coordination, the sense of confidence in drawing for others, and the accuracy of perspective layout. The first of these is the line through dot exercise, in which 2 dots are placed randomly on a drawing sheet. Begin at 1 and try to draw a straight line through it to the second dot. Always keep the eye trained on the second dot, and the hand will follow the line of sight. Try drawing the line in different directions. As hand-eye coordination improves, increase the distance between the 2 dots. The next 2 exercises are aimed at improving accuracy in the placement of converging perspective lines. Using the same line through dot technique, draw 2 lines that are fanned out from an imaginary vertex or vanishing point. Now, keeping the eye on this vanishing point, draw a third line between the first 2 that would converge upon the same point, interior fanning. Similarly, 2 lines may be drawn fanning out from an imaginary vertex, with the third drawn outside of these, exterior fanning. Finally, use these line drawing principles to judge receding squares in perspective. Draw 3 lines that converge upon a point on a horizon. Then estimate the location of the first square as it would appear in perspective. Estimate the next square at approximately half the size of the first one. The accuracy of the estimates may be checked by projecting the diagonals of the squares towards their point of convergence on the horizon line. A. Warm-up exercises. A. Line through dot. B. Interior fanning. C. Exterior fanning. D. Receding squares in perspective. Getting started on a drawing. You have decided that you would like to try drawing in dialogue with your client group or a group of users, so you sit down in front of your 19 by 24-inch sheet of paper to begin. The vast expanse of empty whiteness appears intimidating, and your mind goes as blank as the piece of paper. Where do you begin? Begin by talking, not drawing. The talk should center on the activity that the image is to depict. There is a tightness related to poor posture and improper attitude towards the drawing. Sitting tightly, hunched near the surface, results in a drawing that is similarly small and tight-looking. A distorted image can also be expected if the drawing is done on a flat surface. This distortion is alleviated somewhat by tipping the drawing surface up at an angle. Greater freedom and looseness are gained by pushing far enough back from the board to allow movement of the whole arm. It should be able to swing freely as on a pivot from the shoulder. Although tiny, controlled movements of the wrist and finger joints help in finely detailed drawing, the elbow and shoulders serve as a fulcrum for the large, sweeping and rhythmic motions of the co-design drawing. This rhythm is often aided by light music. Swing the pen back and forth across the page without touching it until the image can almost be seen in invisible lines on the surface of the paper. The underside of the little finger of the drawing hand may lightly trace the page to provide support and control, and the grip on the pen should be firm without getting the cramp in the hand. These sound like golfing tips. Still, that page is blank, isn't it? Since the images are based on an activity, first draw a person engaged in that activity, eating, bicycling, sitting at the desk. A line drawn horizontally through the eyes of the sole figure becomes the horizon line for the subsequent perspective drawing and the placement of all the other environmental features. Entourage. Once you have that first person drawn, all the other elements of the drawing can be related to it. You will notice also that the paper is no longer empty. Preparing to draw. A tight drawing results from a tightly hunched posture. B. Distortion results from the improper viewing angle. C. Whole arm movement results in a free, rhythmic drawing. Constructing the scene. The graphic tools of drawing in dialogue. Co-design artists are equipped with certain tools that allow them to progress smoothly from the design dialogue into an image. Perhaps the most important of these tools is the use of perspective theory. The drawing always begins with a preliminary human figure engaged in an activity, then progresses into a three-dimensional sketch. The techniques are simpler than traditional perspective drawings. The co-design image is composed without pre-existing plans or elevations. Throughout the next section of the book, the authors assume some familiarity with the principles of drawing in perspective. Useful rules of thumb for drawing in dialogue. The co-design artist does not work in the controlled atmosphere of the drawing studio, but rather in the hectic and noisy chaos of the public workshop, where people change their mind halfway through an image that an artist is drawing in indelible felt pen. How does the artist proceed? Using the human figure as the basic unit of measure. The co-design image always begins with a human figure engaged in the activity under consideration. This figure is drawn roughly in the center of the drawing sheet, about 4 inches high. A light eye line is drawn horizontally through the eyes of the figure, which becomes the horizon line for the subsequent perspective. The eyes of this first figure also constitute the vanishing point for the perspective. At this point, the artist may check with the participants and develop some of the other aspects of the sketch without actually framing it in with perspective lines. Perhaps the artist will be asked to add more figures or furnishing or foliage, but at some point the space can be further defined by location walkways, rows, and buildings using the starter figure as a horizontal measuring stick. Figures as a measure of space. A. Start with the figure about 4 inches high. B. Positioning other figures starts to define scene. C. The figures serve as a measuring stick for both horizontal and vertical measurement. Here, an 8-foot wide pathway is quickly defined. Correlating activity with drawing. A. Co-design image may be thought of as a collection of activities. B. Each of these activities may be thought of as a two-dimensional plane that overlaps the next. Just as in a child's shadow box, the overlapping layers of activities are graphic means of depicting the overlapping patterns of activity that bring life to a place. A. Laying out an interior scene. A. The beginning of an interior scene. B. The 5-foot figure acts as a measurement for defining the horizontal and vertical limits of the room. C. Depth measurement helps in deciding where the back wall lies. Judge the size of the first square on the side wall and project it back in perspective. Just as the co-design dialogue focuses on activities, so too does the co-design image. It may be beneficial to think of the scene as a series of activities that overlap one another and recede into the picture plane. The image simply layers these activities on one another as separate planes, much as two-dimensional paper cutouts are layered in a child's shadow box to achieve the illusion of three-dimensional space. The first figure that was drawn may act as the unit of measurement for setting out distances in perspective. Assume the eye line of this figure to be 5 feet, 1.5 meters above the floor. This unit will allow the construction of horizontal and vertical measurements scaled with the drawing pen. An imagery window can be drawn outlined in the position of the walls and ceiling in the plane of the drawing where this reference figure is standing. This window can actually be drawn in as an aid in establishing the boundaries of the room. The entire image may be thought of as a series of such windows layered one in front of the next, with each layer as an activity. The vanishing point, which was located earlier as the eyes of the reference figure, now becomes the point from which the lines defining the intersection of the walls, ceiling, and floors emanate. Placing the index finger of the non-drawing hand on this vanishing point provides a reference for fanning perspective lines. Already the illusion of depth is taking place, although the depth of the back wall is not yet established. Avoid the natural tendency to make the depths too distant. There are two time-honored techniques for quickly judging depth in perspective: the Leonardo da Vinci method and, of course, guessing. Leonardo set up depth measurements by first estimating the size of a square panel on the floor or wall and then extending a diagonal from the top corner of the square through the midpoint of the other side of the square until it intersects with the floor and wall line. This point of intersection becomes the edge of the next square. If this process is continued, the wall will quickly be marked off with squares of equal size in perspective, allowing you to locate other environmental figures within the drawing. A third method, which Stanley King developed, uses arithmetic ratios and the reference figure itself to establish depth measurements on the ground plane. The 4-inch high figure represents a person 30 feet, about 10 meters in the distance, referred to calculations in Appendix D. A second figure with her feet at his knee height, or 3/4 of his height, will be 40 feet, about 13 meters away in perspective. A third figure with his feet at her knee height or 3/4 of her height, and therefore half of the height of the first figure, will be 60 feet, about 16 meters away from the viewer. This means that the distance between the first two figures is 10 feet, 40 minus 30, or about 3 meters. The distance between the next two figures is 20 feet, 60 minus 40, or about 6 meters. These dimensions set out on the ground plane allow you to develop the vertical measure using a 5-foot figure height as a guide. The formula for depth measurement in perspective: A. Divide the reference figure at knees and waist to locate distance figures. B. Now that an accurate depth measurement is available, other environmental features can be placed. C. The plan can be derived from the perspective using the same formula. Shifting the focus of the drawing. Often during the course of the design dialogue, a shift in the focus of discussion means that the focus of the drawing shifts. Perhaps the group becomes more interested in an idea that seems to be developing on the right side of the picture, or something that is occurring near the back wall. When drawing in indelible indelible felt pen. There's not a great deal of latitude in changing the existing drawing, but some simple moves with the next few strokes of the pen will allow the design dialogue to continue. One such technique is to allow the sketch to evolve gradually from a one-point to a two-point perspective. The action or focus of the drawing shifts to the right as the artist redraws the horizontal lines to make them fan out so that they now vanish to a point on the horizon line that is no longer within the picture plane. Similarly, the scene may be shifted from inside the room to a neighboring room or even an adjacent outdoor space. In effect, the artist looked through the wall. Although the drawing may now exceed the normal cone of human vision, the rules of perspective are only the artist's aid in discussing design ideas. The point is to retain the flexibility and adaptability of the drawing. It may look messy when you're finished, but it is much more important to allow the design discussion to go where it wants and to record the environmental information. The value and direction of the drawing should remain under the control of the artist so that it conveys the information that is desired. Never let the drawing limit what you want to say, for it is only a tool for the sharing and communication of the ideas. The final drawing can be cleaned up later for inclusion in a report or exhibition, but for now do not be concerned about its messy vitality. Avoid overdrawing the same line if it was drawn incorrectly in the first instance. Overdrawing only attracts attention to the error.